My wife's father called me worthless trash in front of family. He got 3 messages the next day. Please stay with me as I tell my story. And please, do not forget to support our channel by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos, and sharing your loved ones. Your support means the world to us. Now to our story. MPO. He raised his glass, looked me in the eye, and said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "You're worthless trash." My daughter married down. The sound of forks clinking stopped. Conversations ended mid-sentence. All eyes turned toward me, some wide with shock, others pretending to focus on their plates. My face burned, not from anger but disbelief. I forced a smile, swallowing the lump rising in my throat. I glanced at my wife. She didn't look at me, just stared at her food, silent. That silence cut deeper than his words. Her father leaned back, satisfied, sipping his wine like he'd won some twisted game. I looked around the table. Her mother shifted uncomfortably. Her brother cleared his throat and changed the subject, but nobody said anything to stop him. Not even her. That hurt the most. If strangers had said it, I'd have shrugged it off. But this was her family. My family. I made it through dinner somehow, smiling, nodding, pretending I was fine. Inside, I was breaking. I replayed his words in my head on the drive home, each time wondering why she didn't defend me. She'd heard every insult, but stayed quiet. That silence said more than anything else. It said I was alone. That night, I barely slept. She asked if I was okay once. I said I was tired. She didn't ask again. In the dark, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream, beg, or cry. I was going to speak, clearly and directly, but not to yell. I had 3 things to say to 3 people, and each message would be a truth they couldn't ignore. At 7:13 a.m., I sent the first one. It wasn't angry, just honest. At 7:16, the second left my phone. This one was heavy, maybe the hardest to write. And at 7:21, the third went out. It was short but powerful. After that, I put my phone down and took a long breath. They thought I would break, that I'd beg for approval or stay silent forever. But I was done playing nice in a place where silence stood for support and respect had conditions. I didn't need their approval. I needed peace. And peace, I realized, sometimes begins the moment you stop hoping people will see your worth and start showing it to yourself. That night may have broken something between us, but it built something else in me, something stronger, something clear. And that was just the beginning. Looking back, the signs were always there. They weren't loud, not at first. Just quiet jabs, little digs that I brushed off because I wanted to believe the best. The first time I met her father, he shook my hand without looking at me and asked what I did for a living. I told him I worked in tech. He gave a thin smile and said, "Ah, so not a real job then," and moved on like I hadn't said a word. I laughed it off, thinking he was just old-fashioned. At family gatherings, he'd cut me off mid-sentence, finish my stories like I wasn't even in the room. If I offered to help with anything, setting the table, cleaning up, he'd say, "Don't worry, you'll just get in the way." Everyone would chuckle. I did too, but it chipped away at me. One Christmas, I gave their family a thoughtful gift I spent weeks planning. He looked at it, blinked, and said, "I guess you tried." No thank you, no appreciation, just that. I laughed with everyone again, but later I sat alone in the bathroom, wondering why I always felt small around. My wife said he was just old school, that he didn't mean anything by it. So I let it go, again and again. But each time it left a mark. I stopped sharing ideas at the table. I started staying quiet at events. I didn't even realize I was shrinking until my therapist pointed it out. "He doesn't respect you," she said one day gently. "Why do you keep putting yourself in his space?" Because I loved my wife. Because I believed love meant making peace, not waves. Because I kept thinking if I showed up, was kind, helpful, maybe one day he'd see me, respect me, welcome me. Friends told me I was bending too much. "Why are you trying so hard?" they'd ask. "You're already enough." I heard them, but I didn't listen. I kept showing up, smile painted on, hoping for crumbs of approval. Even the way he'd call me the IT guy when introducing me to his friends, like I was some nameless help desk worker, not a person with a full career in life. Every moment like that told me who he was. I just didn't want to believe it. Until that dinner. Until he finally said what he'd been hinting at for years, out loud for all to hear. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came after 100 little cuts I'd convinced myself weren't real. That night didn't just expose him. It exposed me to all the truth I'd been too afraid to admit. She looked down at her plate and didn't say a word. He had just called me worthless trash. Not behind closed doors. Not whispered in a moment of anger. He said it out loud, clear enough for the entire room to hear. And my wife, my partner, my supposed teammate, just kept eating her food. As if nothing had happened. As if his words were normal, expected, maybe even deserved. That silence hit me harder than the insult itself. For years, I had told myself she was caught in the middle. that she didn't agree with how he treated me, she just didn't know how to respond. But that night, I saw the truth. She didn't speak because part of her accepted what he said. Or maybe she just didn't care enough to defend me. In that moment, something cracked open inside me, a realization that had been building, quietly, in the background. This wasn't just about her father. It was about us. About the way she'd let me carry the weight of his contempt, time and time again, while she stood by, quietly watching. There were so many little moments before that should have told me. The times I asked her why he acted the way he did, and she'd brush it off with a shrug. That's just how he is. As if that explained everything. As if his behavior didn't need to be challenged because it was easier to keep the peace than to stand up for me. I remembered a night last year when I came home from one of their family parties, feeling humiliated and drained. I told her how small I felt, how hurt I was by the way he treated me. She hugged me, said, "I'm sorry he's like that," then turned on Netflix. That was it. No conversation. No action. Just a band-aid over a wound that kept bleeding. But that dinner was different. It was public. It was cruel. And she still said nothing. The silence wasn't neutral. It was permission. That's what finally broke something in me. Not his words, but her lack of them. I could no longer pretend that we were on the same side. I wasn't just fighting for respect from her father. I was fighting alone, period. In the car ride home, I didn't speak. Neither did she. We sat in silence, the air between us heavy with everything unsaid. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a bad night. This was the truth rising to the surface. And I was finally ready to stop pretending. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I went to bed with his words echoing in my head, the silence of my wife wrapping around them like a second slap. But instead of anger, something else settled inside me, stillness. The kind that comes not from giving up, but from clarity. The kind that knows exactly what needs to be done. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, going over every moment from the night before. Every time he'd mocked me. Every time she let him. I thought about how I'd spent years hoping things would change, trying to earn their respect. But I finally saw it. Some people aren't waiting to see your worth. They're hoping you'll never see it yourself. At some point, maybe around 3 a.m., the idea started to form. Not revenge in the way movies show it. No chaos. No screaming. No dramatic scenes. Just the truth sent with care. Measured. Clean. Surgical. I got up early, before the sun rose. The house was quiet. My wife was still asleep. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began to write. The first message wasn't long, but it was precise. I included a date, a quote, a moment I knew would be hard to ignore. It wasn't an attack. It was a mirror, held up to someone who thought no one would ever look them in the eye. The second message was harder, more personal. I took my time with this one. I chose every word carefully, not to hurt, but to reveal. It was truth wrapped in silence that had waited too long to be heard. By the time I hit send, I felt a strange peace. The third one, that was different. Short, direct, a challenge almost. But more than that, it was an invitation to finally step up, to stop pretending, to decide who they were going to be. I sat there afterward, staring at the screen. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It felt like I had exhaled for the first time in months. I didn't send those messages out of hate. I sent them because I couldn't carry the weight of pretending anymore. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth to speak louder than silence. And I knew that once those words were read, things would never go back to the way they were. That was the point. The first message was never meant to destroy him, just reveal him. I opened a new email window, addressed it to his company's HR department, and paused. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity, the kind that shines a light in a place most people hope stays dark. Subject line, a concern about workplace conduct, please review. I kept the tone calm, respectful. I introduced myself briefly, mentioned that I was related to one of their top sales executives. I made it clear that I wasn't contacting them with accusations, but with information they might want to be aware of. Then I attached the audio clip, just 38 seconds long. It started right after he raised his glass and said those exact words. "You're worthless trash. My daughter married down." You could hear the uncomfortable silence that followed. Forks stopping. One person coughing awkwardly. My wife's silence hung heavier than the insult itself. I didn't explain the recording. I didn't need to. His words spoke for themselves. Below the clip I wrote, "I'm not asking for action. I just believe that when someone represents your company at a high level, it's fair to know the values they live by outside the office. That may or may not reflect who they are at work. But if it does, I thought you'd want the chance to address it. No threats. No drama. Just a window into who he really was when no one was watching, except everyone had been." Before I clicked send, I added one more line. "For awareness, I've CC'd name. A senior executive I know has championed diversity and inclusion across your company. I thought their perspective might be valuable here." And that was the part that made this more than a complaint. It made it a conversation. The person I CC'd wasn't just any leader. They were highly respected, vocal about creating inclusive spaces, and had worked closely with the board on culture reform. And they happened to be a person of color. I sent it. Then I closed my laptop and walked away. There were no threats of lawsuits. No posts on social media. Just truth, delivered with precision, dropped into the inbox of people who had the power to decide what kind of culture they supported. He'd built a reputation as the charming face of the company, sharp, confident, polished. But now they'd heard something else. Something raw. Something unfiltered. Sometimes a bomb doesn't need to explode. It just needs to exist, silent, undeniable, impossible to ignore. I didn't write this one. I spoke it. It felt too personal to type. Too full of things I'd held back for years. So I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, and recorded my voice. No script. No planning. Just truth. You stayed silent while I was crushed, I began, voice steady but low. I don't think you even realize what that did to me. I paused, then continued. This isn't just about last night. It's about every night like it. Every moment when your father disrespected me, and you said nothing. Every time I laughed it off to keep the peace, and you let me. I can't do it anymore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her of being cruel. But I let the weight of my disappointment settle into every word. I stood by you through everything. I showed up to every family dinner, every holiday, every gathering, even when I felt like an outsider in my own marriage. I kept thinking you'd see it, that you'd step in, that one day you'd say, enough. But you never did. There was another long pause. I thought about stopping, but I wasn't done. I used to believe we were a team, that if someone came for me, you'd stand beside me. But when you looked me in the eye and called me trash, and you kept your eyes on your plate, that told me everything. My throat tightened, but I didn't let it take the message from me. I'm not angry at you, I said quietly. I'm just done begging for support that should have always been there. Done waiting for you to choose me in rooms where I've already been humiliated. I told her I was leaving, not to punish her, not to make her chase me, but because staying meant continuing to betray myself. I'm not asking you to fix this, I said. I'm not asking you to say anything right now. I just wanted you to hear what I've never said, what I needed you to understand before I walk out that door. I ended the voice note with 7 final words. I'll let your silence answer for you. Then I hit send. I didn't expect a reply. Maybe one would come, maybe not. But for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for it. I had spoken my truth, not in anger, not to hurt, but to be free. And sometimes freedom starts with hearing yourself say the things you've buried too long. The last message was short, but it carried weight. I sent it to her brother, James. The quiet one. The one who always watched his father's behavior with a look that said he didn't agree, but never said so out loud. Over the years, I'd seen it in his eyes. That discomfort, that flicker of shame. But he never spoke. Not when it mattered. Until now, I never asked him to. But this time I did. James, I started. You've always known the truth. You've seen how your father treats me. Not just last night. Every year. Every visit. Every time he decided to show me how little I mattered, and how easy it was to get away with it. I paused to breathe, then continued. I never blamed you for staying silent. I know it's not easy to stand up to a man like that. I know what it cost you just to roll your eyes or walk out of the room when he said something cruel. But that's the thing. It does cost something. I let those words settle for a second. You're not your father. That much is clear. But not being him isn't the same as being someone better. I knew those words would sting. They were meant to. I'm not asking you to take my side out of pity. I'm asking you to decide who you really are. Because silence is a choice. And your father's power has only lasted this long because too many people around him have made that choice. I kept my tone level but direct. I've stepped away. From him. From her. From all of it. But that dinner didn't just break something in me. It lit something in you too. I saw it. Then I gave him one line to sit with. It's your turn now. I hit send and didn't expect anything. James was always quiet, always neutral. But something about this felt different. I didn't push. I didn't follow up. 2 days later, I got the call. He had gathered the family. Without me. Without her. Just them. And for the first time in his life, he told his father he was done letting him bully people. Told him what he said was wrong. That staying silent all these years made him part of the problem. It wasn't dramatic. Just honest. Calm. Clear. That message wasn't revenge. It was a hand held out to someone still standing in the shadow of a man who'd never deserved the power he had. And for once, someone took it. They thought I'd cry. They thought I'd crawl back, tail between my legs, waiting for apologies that would never come. That I'd second-guess myself, wonder if I overreacted. But instead, I poured gasoline. Not to destroy, but to expose. And then I stepped back and let the truth burn quietly, without a word. The messages did what I hoped they would. Opened eyes, started fires, made people look at what they'd ignored for too long. One by one, the cracks began to show. It started with the company. 2 days after I sent the email, HR reached out to the father-in-law's department. Discreet but serious. They requested a meeting. Not an accusation, just an internal review. A few senior executives were now aware of who he really was outside the office. His polished reputation? Suddenly, it wasn't so clean. Then James followed through. I didn't know if he would, but he did. He called a family meeting without me, without her, just them. And for the first time, he let it all out. He told them how long he'd been ashamed of his father's behavior, how silence wasn't strength, it was surrender. He said he was tired of pretending things were fine just because it was easier that. I wasn't there, but word got back. Her mother cried. Her father didn't say much. Just sat there. And my wife, she broke. She tried calling. I didn't answer. She sent texts, long ones filled with pain and confusion. Regret, but no truth. Still no real acknowledgement of her silence. Only the fallout it brought. I read them, but I didn't reply. Because by then, I had moved out. I had packed my things, found a quiet apartment with sunlight in the mornings, and finally slept without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing on my chest. I didn't need to witness their chaos. I didn't need to hear the apologies after the storm. I had seen what I needed to see. Who stood by me, who didn't, and what happened when I stopped asking people to change and simply walked away. Some fires don't need fuel, just air. And once I stopped trying to hold everything together, the truth had room to breathe. And it did. They thought I'd fall apart. But all I did was stop lying to myself. I didn't ruin their world. I just stopped protecting the illusion they'd built. And in the silence I left behind, the noise of their own choices became impossible to ignore. Funny how worthless trash can fertilize something new. That phrase used to echo in my head over and over. Not just because he said it, but because a part of me feared he might be right. That deep, buried part that wondered if I really didn't measure up. But silence has a way of clearing out noise, and distance makes things sharp. And now I see it all differently. I didn't need to fight him. I just needed to stop trying to earn space where I was never valued. After I moved out, I started small. A new apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Quiet mornings, my own coffee mug, my own rules. No tension, no tiptoeing, just peace. That alone was worth more than years of approval I never really had. I went back to therapy with new purpose. Not to fix what was broken in me, but to understand why I let myself bend for so long. Why I kept shrinking around people who didn't clap when I stood tall. It hurt to look at those patterns, but facing it made me stronger. Then came the job. A new role, new company, new people who didn't know me through anyone else's lens. And for the first time, I showed up without pretending. I wasn't trying to impress. I was just being myself, and that turned out to be enough. More than enough. I started reconnecting with friends I'd pushed away while trying to hold a fragile marriage together. I let people back in who had always believed in me. Slowly, I started to believe in me too. It wasn't revenge I found in all this. It was reclamation. Of my time, my energy, my self-worth. I didn't need them to see my value. I just needed to stop handing it over. The words he used to hurt me now feel almost absurd. Worthless trash. But trash has a funny way of becoming soil, breaking down into the foundation for new growth. He tried to bury me. Instead, he planted me. I'm not bitter, just wiser, more whole. I still have questions, wounds, but I no longer carry them like shame. I carry them like proof that I've lived and that I've walked away from what didn't serve me. So no, I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped crossing ones that only led to pain. And in their place, I built something stronger, a life where I decide my own worth. I wrote one more message, but I never sent it. It was months later. The dust had settled. I had a new life, new routines. My mornings were quiet, my evenings calm. No drama, no tension, no walking on eggshells. But one night, out of nowhere, I felt the urge to write. Not out of anger. Not because I needed to say something. Just to put it on paper, one last time. To get it out of me. So I sat down, opened a blank document, and started typing. Do you remember that dinner? I wrote. The one where you raised your glass and tried to humiliate me in front of your whole family? I do. Every detail. The sound of the room going quiet. The way you smirked. The way your daughter looked down and said nothing. I kept going. I told him what happened after. How I moved out. How I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I wrote about the messages. The company review. The family meeting. His son finally speaking up. His daughter left behind in the silence she chose. Then I told him what he never got to see. The part where I found peace. I told him about the new job, the apartment filled with light, the version of myself that no longer waited for anyone's approval. I didn't curse him. I didn't insult him. I just said the truth. You tried to make me feel small, I wrote, but you only made me see how big I had to become to walk away. And at the very end, I typed something that made me stop. I forgive you. but I won't give you space in my life again. I stared at the screen. Then I highlighted the message, pressed delete, watched it disappear. Because forgiveness doesn't mean returning. It doesn't mean reopening doors that were shut for a reason. Some people don't deserve your voice. They only deserve your silence, and the distance that silence creates. I stood up, walked to the window, and raised a glass of water to the night sky. Not to him, not to them, to me, to the man they called worthless trash, to the one who learned his value when nobody else bothered to the quiet strength of starting over. No message could say it better than that, so I let it go, not with words, not with fire, but with a deep breath and the calm that comes when you finally, fully leave the past behind.